All right, welcome. Today I am interviewing Diego Perez, also known as Young Pueblo, and we're going to talk about his new book, How to Love Better. We haven't had a conversation in, gosh, like 4 or 5 years at least.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, it time flies, and I've always really appreciated your work, but I've really begun to dive into it more just in the last 6 months, actually, and have a deep admiration for you and for the way in which you bring your art into the world
Mm.
and the way in which you bring healing to others through your words and the generosity and the kindness that you emanate. And, the writer community is large and it's small. And anytime your name comes up, it's always something really beautiful, something really
That's so
positive.
nice.
Yeah. Well, and it's true. And so everyone, whoever says your name is like, oh, he's such an amazing, generous, kind-hearted person. And so it's really special for me to be able to share your work with my audience and introduce anyone who maybe hasn't heard of you, which maybe there's somebody out there to your work. But your work has really taken the world by storm. And I have your book here, How to Love Better. This is your latest.
Mm. That's the
And
one. Yeah.
yeah. And we were just talking about, and you were telling me that you feel really proud of this book. And I would love to hear a little bit of backstory too. And I'm sure, you've said told
Mm.
us a million times, but I think it's really important for people to hear, what brought you to this place to write this book.
Yeah, I think it was the shock of seeing that there was a deep connection between personal growth and how you can bring harmony into a relationship. I was totally oblivious to that. I mean, and really I was oblivious to myself. Like I was, had very little self-awareness and um, was almost like an enemy to my emotions.
Yeah.
But that caused me so much internal havoc and, so many bad habits and, abusing drugs and alcohol and everything and pushing my body to the edge. All of that sort of led to me really needing to save myself. And I went into meditating because I needed to almost like reformat my mind and just build a new type of conditioning.
Hmm.
Um, and I went into it because I needed to help myself, and I was shocked that the skills of, those qualities of self-awareness, of non-reaction, of compassion for yourself and others, they were immediately helping me. It made my mind feel lighter. But when I finished the first retreat and then I started, reconnected with my wife, I saw that immediately they were helping me be a better, different version of myself in my relationship. And then when she started meditating as well, it opened up a whole new chapter in our relationship. And I was just shocked by how these two things are intrinsically connected and that we don't pay enough attention to that connection. So that's really why I knew right off the bat, like I wanted to write about personal growth, but I held off on writing How to Love Better because I knew that there was a big, big story there, a lot of lessons that I learned over time, but I wanted to also give myself time to develop as a writer before I put this like big work together. But now we're here, and I'm glad that the book exists and that I can look at it and people are reading it now.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's already a New York Times bestseller, of course, because all of your books are incredible. And I've been reading it a little bit here and there every night when I have, 5 or 10 minutes after my daughter goes to sleep. And I really loved also learning just more about your personal story with your wife, Sarah.
Mm.
And you guys have been together for,
17 years, maybe 18 this summer.
yeah, well, yeah, so you've been through the trenches together. And I was reading about
Yeah.
how when you first got together, it was just so magnetic, fireworks. You could not be
Hmm.
happier. And yet there was such a tumultuous period. I think you said about 6 or so years.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. It was really difficult. I think that first chapter of our relationship was just so chaotic. It felt like a giant blame game where, anytime I would feel tension in um, my mind would try to figure out how it was her fault. And it was
Mhm.
the same thing with her. She would feel tension, try to figure out how it was my fault. Neither of us taking any type of accountability, neither of us wanting to realize that there are definitely times where your partner makes a mistake and an argument arises and they need to apologize. But a huge chunk of the time, it's the mind looking for a problem because the mind is just rippling with tension.
Mhm.
And that was really challenging for us because we did not see the way we were our own problem. And then once we started meditating, it was like, okay, wait, this tension in my mind isn't always your fault. Like,
Mhm.
actually, the mind is looking for more cannon fodder. It's looking for more, like, just more reasons to grow that feeling of being upset. And because we're in proximity to each other, because we're physically close to each other, it's easy to point my attention to you.
Yeah.
And that was a very gradual learning for the two of us that just helped us, take accountability and start bringing in our individual harmony and sharing that with each other.
Mhm. And you began meditating first.
Yeah, I started like 9 months before Sarah. She was also like very interested in it too. And, I never had to like I didn't have to like make her interested in it at all because she like our friend told us about it together.
Yeah.
And I ended up going first because I had more flexibility at the time and she had just started a new job as a scientist. So she had to wait a little bit to go 9 months later.
Mhm. And by go, you mean like to Vipassana retreat?
Yeah, to go for a silent 10-day. Yeah, Vipassana retreat.
So that was your first introduction as 10 day.
Yeah, yeah. I had not meditated before that. I had not this is a pre like wellness era, like a pre like, even the word self-love wasn't popular yet or anything like that. Um and I think I had meditated once
Mhm.
for like 20 minutes. And I had no instruction, like I didn't know I just sat down and closed my eyes and it wasn't productive. But yeah, I was called to it because I knew a friend of mine had done it. And he got so much benefit from it. And I was like, oh, if he could do it, I could do it too. So I just jumped right in.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember about, 10, 15 years ago, at least in my area, that was the thing that people were doing. Like people were going
Hmm.
to asana, and it was such a simpler time in some ways, you know. Like the internet and social media had not quite exploded in the way that it had now, and there's so many different avenues for spiritual growth. And I think
Right.
there's also a lot of tools that can actually even be bypassy. Like it looks like spiritual growth, but it's actually just another way to become hyper individualistic or to hide from
Mm,
ourselves. And so there have been times where, I think people have tried meditating and it didn't help them. But when I read your book and listen to your experiences of meditating, it actually inspires me to meditate more. And one of
mm,
the reasons for that is because you speak about really being present in the body and really being aware of
yeah,
what's happening. And I think that there's a big difference for people who are meditating to sort of escape their reality and somebody who
totally.
be present in themselves and really be in the world and help their relationships through that. So, could you speak to the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, one, there's a lot of different types of meditating.
Yeah.
There's so many different traditions, and different traditions have different goals, different methods that they apply, and different like cosmological frameworks that they work inside of.
Mm.
So but there are many strands. I think the two common ones are sort of traditions that are focused on purification, which is like the Vipassana tradition. It's very focused on purifying the mind, cleansing the mind, sort of removing ignorance, helping the mind see reality as it is. And then there are other traditions that are much more bliss oriented, where they are just, using a mantra or using, whatever practice it could be to just like make the mind solely more concentrated, and with concentration comes a lot of really big loads of bliss. And I've always been inclined towards that Vipassana style of meditating because it helps you see reality without projecting onto it, without
Yeah.
projecting my hate onto it, just being able to see the situation as it is, whether the situation is good or bad or whatever it could be, but you're trying to just observe it clearly.
Hmm.
And I think that quality was definitely missing in my life.
Yeah.
And being able to recognize where I've made mistakes, like, and even deeply recognizing that because I had such a superficial relationship with myself, my relationship with my parents, with my wife, with my siblings, they were all very surface level.
Mhm.
And that was challenging and difficult to accept, but it was also like, okay, this is the reality, but now I can make things different. And I do like that there's a balance, there's a value to pulling yourself out of your life for a little while,
Yeah.
going to some degree of retreat and then coming back into your life with a new set of skills and a new framework to work inside of. And really, when I think about meditating, like, the Vipassana is just, it's a mental gym. I think
Yeah.
you're taking yourself to really specifically focus on building these qualities of awareness, non reaction, and compassion because you have them in your mind, but they're not necessarily strong.
I love that. And I want to circle back to when you said that you realized that your relationships were surface level. How did
Mhm.
you recognize that? And how would somebody else recognize that their relationships are surface level? Maybe they think their relationships are as vulnerable as it gets.
Yeah, and that's probably true. It is as vulnerable as it gets, but that can be extended. It could be deepened.
Mhm.
And I think it hit me as an insight because I saw how the way I would run away from my own fear or tense moments, um, it tied into the way I would run away from difficult conversations with
Right.
people that I care about deeply. And I saw that these things were just so deeply connected and it was interesting the way over time I was able to build that skill of resilience, almost like emotional resilience, where I could be with my sadness and be okay. I could be with, whatever tension is there. And immediately that translated into not running away from an argument and being
Mhm.
like, okay, like I'm not in danger. This isn't going to break the home, but let me be here and let me try to do my part to bring some harmony into this.
Mhm. What's the silliest argument you think you and your wife ever had?
Oh my gosh. I think that the silliest ones were like she really likes to be very exact. Like she's very sort of the micro world is very clear to her.
As a
And
scientist.
yeah, she's a scientist. If she makes an appointment, she likes to follow through on it. And I move about the world a little more loosely, right? Like I take a much more macro view. So I think some of our most heated arguments have been around like, oh, I need to cancel this dentist appointment and
Mhm.
reschedule. And she's like, no, but why don't you tell me? Why don't you plan better? And those moments look so silly now, but like they would get really heated over these tiny little things.
My husband and I once had a fight over a fern. Like the little tendrils growing,
Yeah.
that they just sprout these really long tendrils, and he wanted to cut it, and I didn't want him to cut it, and so we had a fight about that.
Oh
Um,
my
I
gosh.
can remember this was like 8 years ago. We were in our tiny little apartment, and it was just the dumbest fight you've ever seen, and yet we really went there. And it really does take a long time, I think, as a couple to build the safety and the trust to even be vulnerable in a way that you can face each other in conflict in a healthy way, especially when you
Mm,
come from a background where that wasn't the norm,
right.
which I know you did.
Yeah. And it's funny. I've been using the word culture a
Mm,
lot.
mhm.
And it was almost like it like passively entered my language, but it feels really real because you and your partner are building a culture that
Yeah,
is just for the two of you, right?
yeah,
Because every relationship is incredibly unique. And the way that you two like to be supported, it's not going to look the same for other people. And it may even look wrong
yeah.
because of you have your own preconceptions and whatnot, but you know each other and you have your own sort of dance that you do with each other. And it feels like it took so much time for my wife and I to build a culture that felt really good for the two of us.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was a battle because in relation to like, growing up and what I saw from my parents, like my parents they were wonderful and they did their best, but it was quite challenging because we had so many pressures from poverty and the external pressure of poverty really pushed and it made the home feel like a constant struggle. And I would see them argue a lot about
Mhm.
how to pay the rent, how to put food in the fridge. And to me, it created a lot of confusion because it made me think, oh, if they're arguing so much, why are they together? Do they actually love each other? but really it was the external pressure of society that made it so hard for them to, you know, to just hold the fort together.
Yeah. Yeah, there's these external pressures in society and culture. I've been sitting with that a lot lately too, as I go through some grief portals of my own and, sitting with the way that I want my work to be in the world and seeing the way that uh, things are. There's just quite the celebrity culture now. And it's
Mm.
just so interesting how there's so many people that really yearn for peace and, yeah, a secure, quiet, simple life. And yet the external does make it more difficult to achieve that. And so for those people who are striving for that and feel like they're failing, there are tools that you can use to support yourself. And it's also not easy in this world either that we live in.
No, it's not easy. I think it's constant challenges. And I think that's what I try to I'm like intentionally repetitive about that in the book where
Yeah.
like your relationship's just never going to be perfect. And
Yeah.
it's always going to have ups and downs and you can have a very healthy relationship where you have a good culture that feels conducive to the two of you and still have arguments, still have ups and downs because society paints a picture where it's possible to make everything seamless,
Hmm.
like there are literally like an app called Seamless.
Yeah.
And we like have all these Uber and DoorDash apps that make us think like, oh, we can have a 5-star relationship, like a 5-star partnership. And but no, it's nothing comes perfectly made. And I think the most beautiful parts of life, like in terms of you overcoming past pain, you being able to be more present in everyday life, those things are very gradual. They're hard work. They take time, they take training. And it's the
Hmm.
same thing with your relationship, like building a good culture, learning how to communicate better. All that stuff is very gradual and it's slow work, but beautiful work.
Hmm. Yeah, and grief and praise are, one and the same. And there's a lot of beauty in allowing ourselves to be in the fire and be in the pain of
Mm,
hard moments. And there's nothing on the planet, on this earth, that isn't cyclical. There's nothing that doesn't
yeah.
have a beginning and an end. And learning to ride those waves within the partnership and even accept those deaths that want to happen without having to end the relationship can be really potent and transformative. And you talk about, moving through that with your wife and how meditation helped you. And you share so many of the tools for being in a space where you can really love from your truth and not from your fear. And what
Mm,
would you say to people who maybe are in that place that you and Sarah were in for those 6 years? Because there's also a social media culture where it's very
I know.
like, oh, well, just leave them behind, or anyone who makes you feel anything uncomfortable, just ditch them. And it's really not that simple. And I mean, I've only been in a relationship for 10 years, but we've certainly gone through a lot of waves. And there's been so many times where we've wanted to end it, but really that was just us wanting to turn away from ourselves. And
Yep.
when I really look at our marriage, I'm like, there's literally nobody else who's better for me than this person, but he also challenges me the most. So, how do you define the difference between, let's say, what our culture calls, the red flag relationship, somebody that you should walk away from, or a relationship that's just not worth it, versus a relationship that can help you grow, even if it's, like you said, chaotic?
Yeah, I mean, I love so much of what you said too. I think it's really hard when you have social media mm, trying to feed you your craving, like the
Mhm.
thing that you crave. Like we crave for reality to be easy.
Yeah.
And so we think, oh, like, the right path is going to be easy. The right partnership is going to be easy. But that's a load of nonsense. Like nothing about life is easy. Life is quite challenging. What we can do is equip ourselves with proper tools to be able to do our own healing and to skillfully handle the challenges of life and the ups and downs. But I think some of the most beautiful parts of life, like I knew I like my intuition was very clear about, spending time trying to be a writer, but it was so hard. It was so challenging. It was never like, you write and then everything's going to be easy. But like I spent 3 years just teaching myself how to be clearer, how to like And you know, there was no success in the beginning. It was a constant uphill battle. And even now there's still, even with the success that I've had, there's still challenges of like how to put things up out, out online as the algorithm keeps changing, and
Mhm.
having people sign up to your Substack, and doing all these things that are the part of being a writer that's unseen. So it's just constantly full of challenges, but that doesn't mean it isn't the right path and it isn't rewarding. It's really fun to write. And I think it's the same for our relationships. And when I think about red flags and green flags, like in terms of our relationships, one is that you want to look for someone who not only connects with the three guides that are inside of you, and I'm talking about your intuition, your nervous system, and your values. I think
Mhm.
like that's like, you feel when someone is magnetically, you have that magnetism and you're attracted to them. But then when you're near them, you feel calm. Like you do have a sense of like, oh, I can open up to this person. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean being perpetually easy. It just means that there's a almost like a little bit of a sense of safety even from the beginning.
Mhm.
Um, the other end of that is like, does your intuition say like, wow, this is someone worth your energy, worth your time? And then once you get to know them, how do your values connect? Because your values are where the sort of the foundation of the culture that you're going to build is. That's where it really starts. And the other thing I would look for too is like the biggest green flag is humility.
Mhm.
Humility to just be able to say, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at, this is what I
Mhm.
know, and this is what I'm learning. And to be able to say, I don't know, or
Mhm.
tell me more if you know more about this. But I think someone who appears with all the answers, I'm always very wary of that. Like, how, there's no way to know everything because the space of knowledge is infinitely expanding.
Mhm.
So, and we're tiny little human beings, so we can't know everything.
Yeah, and I always just say like the way that I form my beliefs is I choose to believe what feels good and what supports me in living a healthy and beautiful life of service. But the truth is like we don't actually know anything. And yeah, there's a powerlessness I think that we have to face in our own lives in order to live from that place of humility that you speak of, and it ripples out into our relationships when we are
Oh
able
yeah.
to face our powerlessness. And it just reminds me too of how when we're in deep relationship, we basically have to be in deep relationship with death as well, because we have to accept that if we're going to open our hearts so deeply and let somebody see us and we're going to see them and we're going to like go all the way, we also have to embrace that the ending will come, whether it's through, you decide to end the relationship or you go all the way and eventually your life ends, because that's what it means to be human. So it really
Yeah.
is just such a vulnerable thing to be in relationship. And I'm having my own moments in the last few weeks just with a lot of change happening on our land and our community, and being like, oh, right, this is why so many people close their hearts and just turn away, because this is so excruciating. But, to feel the heartbreak and to feel the grief means that you've loved. And that can be true as well when you're in those moments of conflict with your partner and you choose to turn toward each other instead of away.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that we're so on the same wave. I
Mhm.
think that's the biggest fear of relationships is that we're coming from a place of attachment initially, where we're like really craving for things to exist in a particular way. But what that means is that we're no longer working with the universe, we're working against it. Because if we're trying to maintain a very static sense of reality, eventually the river of the universe is going to blow that away because endings happen. Like
Mhm.
there's change is bound to happen. And what change does is that it does take things away, but it opens things up as well. It can create a whole new chapter for you. And when, we have this like constantly combative relationship with change. And I feel like it's hard because we fear it, but at the same time, we need to let ourselves be inspired by change, because it's because of change that you and I are having this conversation. It's because of change that like, I even get to have an opportunity with my parents and get to know them as, when we're both adults. And I think change has just helped me just be much more inspired and energized to be present in the moments that I have in front of me.
Mhm. Yeah. I've been sitting with this thought lately about there's a narrative that we hear often about how, if you don't make the change, life will make it for you. It's that sort of narrative,
Mm,
right? And, if you don't listen, life will just make it happen, that kind of thing. So it almost frames it sometimes, I feel, as a bit of like a punishment. Like you're not listening, you're not responding, you're not taking action. And so, it's going to be hard and painful. I have experienced that in my own life, but lately I've started to sit with this idea of being in relationship with the mystery and trusting that we don't always have to take action. We don't always have to swiftly figure it out and make the change. Sometimes the change is going to happen and you're not going to know, and that can be okay too. And I would just love to hear what your thoughts are on that because it's been something that's just really been with me lately.
yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things I learned from the I Ching when I used to, ask it questions and read it. I think that was like 2015 when I would look at it a lot
Mm-hmm.
and thinking of non-action as an action where you don't always need to be active to create a solution. Or, sometimes like we feel the urgency of an emotion and we want to put words out there, but really, is it going to make anything better? Is it going to resolve the situation? Is it going to, make things more tense or alleviate things? And I ask myself that when I come into moments where it feels like I should say something, but I think half of the time I don't really need to say something. I think there are times where I can just let the moment be what it is and then just keep moving forward. And of course, like everything with balance, like there are definitely times where you need to act and speak up and be value aligned or whatnot. But a lot of times, I ask myself, do I really need to say this? And where is this coming from? Like, is this coming from past pain or is this coming from, a craving to be heard or is it actually in service?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I want to read this quote that you have here.
Sure.
It says, in a time when people devalue kindness, let your heart remain wide open. Keep giving your gentleness to the world. Act with kindness without worrying about what you will get in return. Even if people forget what you did for them, the universe won't. I think that quote's so beautiful and so true, and it speaks to the energy you're talking about embodying right now.
Yeah. And that's what the cycles you were talking about. Like these actions, they move in circles.
Hmm.
And we forget that. And we have a very sort of, I think our scope of life is very tight often, where we want the person that we treat well to give us the same thing back. And it's not necessarily always going to work out like that.
Mm,
There are going to be people that you still haven't met yet who will return to you a kindness that you gave to someone else. And
mm,
I think that's like one of the magic aspects of life where you literally build your future through your present day actions, but you can't move with expectation. And I found that even in the book launch, right? Like I try my best to help a bunch of different writers. And sometimes I can't. Sometimes there's just like too much going on, and I'm only one person. But I do my best to, you know, try to do my part to make the culture much more community oriented amongst the writers on Instagram. Um, and then I'll help people, but then I'm surprised when I can feel like the energy that I put into helping one person then comes back from somebody else, from
mm,
something totally unforeseen, something totally unexpected. And I love that because like because if I help you one day, that I'm not expecting you to necessarily help me back, but I
mm,
can just trust in the fact that that energy is going to come back around in some way. And I've
mm,
seen that happen over and over again. So I think it's quite beautiful to live in that way where I'm just going to put forward a good action and then I'll see what happens.
And it's the principle of reciprocity, and it doesn't necessarily mean yeah, like you said, that person specifically is going to return the exact same energy to you. There's this ultimate trust in life and trust in love when you live from that place where you give because you have it to give, and it makes you a better person as a result. And then the universe feeds that back to you. And I I see that you do that. You know, I've witnessed you. I see so many of the books that I received to review have you as the blurb. And you blurbed my first book, and yeah, you are such a generous person. You know, we don't know each other super well, but what I've seen just professionally is that you really do go out of your way to support others, and that is so meaningful. And I want to talk a little bit about that piece around expectation and attachment
Mm,
because I think it's different than some people might perceive it, right? Like attachment,
mm.
the sense that you're speaking of is different from the kind of attachment work that I might do with my audience, right? Like we do a lot of
Yeah,
attachment
totally.
work and we're working on the very healthy, normal human attachment where
Hmm.
we actually are wired to bond and to connect and to need each other. And so sometimes these principles that are spiritual, more rooted in Buddhism that talk about attachment can confuse people. So I want you to speak to that and help us understand the difference.
Yeah, it's so funny because anytime I start a talk, like when I have an event or something like that, I'll mention the word attachment and I'm like, okay, I'm not talking about Western psychological attachment. I'm talking about old school attachment from
Mhm.
2,600 years ago, what the Buddha understood as one of the primary cause of suffering. And you can call
Mhm.
it attachment, you can call it craving, but they're essentially the same thing. And I think it's really, it's an important thing to pay attention to, like the way that our mind will crave for certain scenarios to be true and to always be true. And what we don't often see is that the cravings that we have for things to exist in a particular way, they'll be in the mind, but when they become active, they manifest as the attempt to control. And
Mhm.
that's when you start getting a lot of problems, is
Yeah.
where you can definitely control your actions, but that's about it. I mean, you really cannot control another person, their decisions, the way they grow in life, the way they evolve. And when you come to a relationship with that energy of attachment, then you're slowly squeezing the life out of the relationship. And I think it's hard. It's hard to accept that the attachments can become roadblocks, but seeing the way attachments would create problems in my own life, it made me lean on communication and the understanding that if you really love each other, the way to really care for each other is to be really honest about the way that you like your happiness to be supported.
Mhm.
And when you see the way that your partner has their wants and needs and the way I have my wants and needs, you can then look at each other's list and say, oh, these are things that I can voluntarily do for you, that
Mhm.
it would actually make me happy to also do these things for you. And coming from that place of voluntary commitments feels much more empowered than having someone just expect, like,
Yeah.
or to read my mind, like it's going to be impossible, but people really want, their partners to read their minds. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, and we change too. And I think we also need to be open to realizing that we're not always going to even know sometimes how we want to be loved, or we might have it like you talk about this craving for things to be a certain way that we sort of create tunnel vision and we don't allow ourselves to see all of the different forms of love that are actually around us all of the time or coming towards us.
Mm,
I've really had to work on that with my husband because he is a doer and I'm more of a feeler. And we sometimes get our wires crossed because I'm not seeing all of the ways that he's trying to love me through
mm,
just planning certain things or, you know, taking care of a trip, making sure that all of the things are organized. And so there's a bit of a dance of leaning in to learn how to love each other in the way that we truly desire and also opening ourselves to being loved in all forms. And I think
yeah.
you speak to that so brilliantly in the way that you teach people about expectation and really just being present with each other and being aware of your
Mm.
mind and what your mind is doing in relationship.
Yeah, it's so fun. You really reminded me. I think it sounds like you and I are quite similar, where my wife is like a big doer and she's just like, I feel like in some ways she guides us through the week. Like she
Yeah.
just knows what needs to get done. And I like to work hard too, but I work in like a different way.
Mhm.
Um, and it's really interesting. It took us a long time because there's some degree of truth to those love languages. And I think like I'm sure it's like, much more expansive than just like five or however many there are.
Yeah.
But my wife, she loves like one of the ways that she really loves being taken care of is if I'm really focused on the compost. Like if
Yeah.
I if I do a good job with the compost, I feel like she's very happy. And then what
Yeah.
I like is for her to just sit next to me or to
Yeah.
have her hand on my shoulder or her playing with my hair or something like that. Like that feels way better than, like her solving some other like external problem for us.
Yeah, I can completely resonate. I often joke that in our relationship, I'm the CEO and he's the COO. Like I'm the visionary, the creative energy,
Yeah.
and he's the like, how is it going to work energy? And in our early years, I used to really struggle because I would bring him these like crazy ideas or these big, I'm always having like a million ideas and creative thoughts. And then he would start to break it down of like all of the reasons why it wouldn't work. And at first I was like, oh, why do you have to like rain on my parade and, not support my dream? But then when I really slowed down and presenced and stepped out of that story, what I saw was the reality is he's always trying to make my dreams come true. And his mind is always
Wow.
trying to reverse engineer what are the blocks or the obstacles that need to be removed, or how can we work with this to make it work, right? That's what the engineer does. And so then I was able to pause and when I know, okay, if I really want like excited energy that's not going to like start to try to rework things right now, I just need to bring that to somebody else. And then when I'm ready
Yeah.
to actually bring it to fruition and I want to dissect it a little bit, then I'll bring it to him and just see the beauty and like the love that's in that. That he's not
Wow.
blocking me, right? And I kind of get the sense maybe your partnership, you have similar dynamics of the more logical and the more creative brain. And that's
Yeah.
beautiful team, but it is a challenge at first.
I mean, it's eerily similar. Like
Mhm.
honestly, like the way that Sarah and I see it, like I said, like I feel like she can get us through the week, but then oftentimes I can get us like through the year
Yeah.
or get us through like help us make these big moves where it was from my intuition. I felt like, oh, we needed to move from Boston to New York City. And then once we were in New York for 7 years, it was like, oh, we should go, get a house in Western Massachusetts. And or even like down to like our long-term investments or things like that. That's like where my mind comes to play. So like I can see the long-term investments.
Yeah.
She can do the taxes.
Hmm.
And it's so funny that it comes down. But similarly, like when I come up with big ideas, um, we have like almost trained ourselves to, where she could see the where it's difficult or where it's hard and whatnot. And I remember moments where I'm like, Sarah, like please be really positive about this,
Yeah.
like, because I'm wildly positive. Like, I feel like the only thing I can really do is like just make things happen. So, and she's supported me by giving me her practical positivity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just different and it's
Yeah.
sometimes challenging, and then I'm also so grateful because he sees things that I wouldn't see or clears obstacles that I just wouldn't have thought of, or just the little details, right? Because when you're thinking big all of the time, there's little
Yeah.
details that need to be tended to. And so, there, yeah, like you said, it's a culture, it's an ecosystem, there's roles, and we can't play the same role. So you're going to have a partner who's very different from you. And our minds tend to make that wrong, but actually it's perfectly designed so that you can complement each other. But first, you have to step out of that demonization, making them the enemy. That's what the ego wants to do when it recognizes difference. And it sounds like you have the path perfectly laid out for people to be unraveling that for themselves. And I just love this book so much because there's just so many beautiful passages where you write so eloquently about love. Like when you understand that relationships are not just a space of safety and nourishment, but they are also a space that fuels your evolution, you will no longer be surprised when moments of struggle arise between you and the one you love. When a fight arises, it does not necessarily mean that the two of you are not right for each other. The survivalist mind will see an argument as dangerous, and it will want to make excuses to why it needs to convince you to run. This is why pausing before you speak to gather yourself and assess how you want to show up in an argument is vital. This will help you shift from survivalist mindset into an intentional one that seeks to repair as opposed to control.
Mm, thank you. That's, I mean, it's such an, honestly, it's an honor hearing that from you. And just your support of my work and the book and everything. Like, I've been appreciating you for a long time and just have so much respect for everything you've been giving to the world.
Mm,
And have been inspired by, your growth, your reach, like just the way you do things. And I'm glad that we're in this community together because I feel like that I see you doing something similar where to me it feels important to, whenever I see someone who's been really successful and then they only follow zero people
mhm.
or, something like that, it's just unrealistic because so many people helped you get there.
Yeah,
Whether you asked them or whether you didn't ask them.
yeah,
Like it just takes a lot of people sharing your work and I think that quality of just like paying it forward feels really important because I didn't ask people to support me back in 2016 when my account was getting going. Um, but it feels like really important. And I think as I keep meditating and as I keep growing as an individual, it feels like putting forward the things that I've understood that have helped make my life and my relationship better. It's valuable to not just like put them in books, but to like bring them into the practical aspects of how I do work and how
mhm.
I try to show up like in the sort of business moments. And
Yeah.
it I like building a culture of compassionate business, like if that makes sense.
It totally does. And I feel you because I had a daughter 2.5 years ago. So I sort of stepped out for 3 years. Like I published my book while I was pregnant. I had a horrible pregnancy. I was very, very sick, like
Mm.
throwing up 10 times a day every day. So I really
Oh,
didn't work.
wow.
So I wrote my book, published my book, and then I sort of just honestly disappeared for a few years because I just went fully into this spiritual initiation of motherhood, which it really was shamanic for me. And
Yeah.
so I kind of just went out. And then when I came back in, everything had changed. Like social media had changed so much. And I was so
Yeah.
disrupted and I was so stunned, honestly. I was like, oh my gosh, like everything's different. There's so much noise. And I went through a bit of a portal with it. I was like, am I meant to be doing this? Like, does my voice matter? Everyone's already saying it. There's so many people who have just kind of taken what I've written and rewritten it
Yep.
a little bit, and I'm a person who I really want to do this work because I needed this work to survive where I came from in my history, and it feels like a soul calling. But if I feel like it's just an echo chamber and the work's being said, I'm like, well, then I'm not needed, so maybe I should go.
Yeah.
So it's just been really,
Can I tell you how it unfolded in my house too? Like,
yeah, yeah,
so I noticed that you disappeared like very
yeah.
clearly.
Okay.
And then I don't know if it was like a DM or a text that you sent me, and I remember telling Sarah I was like, oh, she's back,
Mm.
like she's and then I felt like I was so happy to see your collab with Vex. And I was like, oh shit, she's really back. Like she's back in the game. And I think that's the reality of like social media, right? Is like people honestly like they the same way that business works. Business is like copy and expand. And social media people do the same thing, whether they credit you or don't credit you.
Yeah,
They'll either be inspired or they'll just copy. And to me, it's like I see that happen all the time. But then I don't want to put limits on my creativity
yeah,
because I'm still growing as an individual. I'm still meditating 2 hours a day. So I know that there are other things that I'm going to understand and then I'll eventually put them in some form of writing. And I feel like the way you care about your inner work is a gift to all of us because there are things that you're going to write that people will copy a year from now. so so
yeah,
keep pushing the frontier for us.
yeah. Thank you. And I want to just mirror back too. Like I have so much admiration and respect for your work. And I really do see you as a leader and somebody in this space who's really embodying their work. And that's not true for every person that's in this space, right? It's very noisy. There's a lot of people and a lot of humans coming into it, and I trust that that's the way that it's meant to be. And I really can sense the authenticity and the depth that emanates from certain people's work. And you're one of the biggest inspirations for me, actually, because you've written so many incredible books and you just crank them out. And I'm like, how is this person doing this? Like, I don't know. What are you like dropping into some sort of channel? Because it's just so incredible how much you put out into the world and how gorgeous the work is. So, yeah, I just want to take a moment to
Thank
appreciate
you.
you for all that you put in.
I'm curious from your perspective. I have this like almost like a guess at how things might unfold, but I feel like we have 3 to 4 years left of social media
Mhm.
before it's kind of just done.
Yeah,
And I really like as AI gets stronger and stronger, I just feel like it's gonna make everything so polished and so like, iterations of copies
yeah,
that social media will just kind of lose its essence of like, where it started in the beginning, which was like to connect us.
yeah,
Um and I think people will, as AI gets stronger, being outdoors is going to become much more of a premium. And I think that there's still going to be space for people who, for people to write books but I think people are going to be much more excited to go see a play or to
yeah,
see a live performance or to see a live reading or a live talk because that that person is real.
exactly. I'm so with you. My husband and I have been talking about this a lot lately because we moved from the city about 4 years ago, and we moved onto 10 acres like in the middle of the forest. Our town doesn't have stoplights. We're slowly getting more and more off grid. And I just spend a lot of time surrounded by nature, and I get a lot of
Yeah.
downloads from that. And I really do feel that the deeper that we get into this technological madness, that you're right, the more people are going to crave depth and humanity. And the way that they're going to make sure that it's real is by being in person. And I want
Yep.
so much. Like, I want to just be with people, really dropped into that place and writing books. And I think, I said to him, I was like, will people even buy books anymore? Or will AI just write them? And everyone's like, it's gonna happen. People are gonna read AI books, but people still, I feel you can feel the soul coming through.
Yeah.
Like I can feel the soul in a book. Like when I'm holding it in my hand, I'm reading your words, but I'm also actually feeling you. I'm connecting to you as
Mm.
the author. And so, yeah, my prayer is that we don't lose our humanity, that this invites us deeper into it.
I really, really, really hope you're right. And it reminds me, so like I have a friend who's a famous meditation teacher, and him and another person they're writing a book right now. And they turned in the manuscript, but they're both older, so they like, wanted to try it out and see what would happen if shoved what all the notes and everything that they had into Chat GPT and have it write a book. They turned it into their editor. The editor immediately knew what they did. And the editor was like, you took the life out of it.
Yeah.
And that was the words. And then they, happily were, taking time to actually write out the book. But I thought it was so fascinating. I'm like that the editor was like, you took the life out of it.
Mhm.
And but I think, okay, so AI is clearly becoming more powerful every like week. So there will come a time where it sounds very, very lifelike. And I was joking with Sarah. I was like, am I gonna have to like in 2029 like film myself writing so that people know that it's like actually not touched by AI? Because that's one thing that I've totally stayed away from. Like at the minimum, what I've done with AI is if I'm writing something fast and I want to post it, I'll use it as a spell check. And I'm like, don't even give me any feedback. Just check if there's any major spelling mistakes, and
Yeah.
then it'll say yes or no. But other than that, I've never asked it to write anything for me because like that's no fun. It's not like you're taking the fun away from the craft.
Yeah, well, you're removing the soul of the art.
Hmm.
And yeah, art does have a soul. It really does. And I feel that immensely. Yeah, I'm really feeling drawn to bringing people together more, inviting them to actually get out of their houses and off of their phones and into nature. We had our first retreat here on the land. I just had like 6 women come out for 3 nights.
Nice.
It was just so sweet to sit together and be around a fire and go for walks. And yeah, I hope that we'll be doing more of that in the years to come. But I want
Yeah,
to
oh,
go, go ahead.
I was thinking, my friend Josh Radner, he said the other day, he was like, it's probably never been a better time to buy a theater because like
Yeah. Yeah.
people are gonna love using that theater later.
That's so true. We don't do screens yet with my daughter, and
Mm,
so we've just been taking her out to see certain performances. We've taken her to 2 dance shows. We took her to see the Nutcracker Ballet, and
hmm.
she just loved. She tried to get on the stage, so we had to go and watch from. We're like, okay, we probably should have pre-framed this. Like, hey, you have to stay in your seat. We're still learning a lot, but it was really special, and I saw the impact that it had on her. Like since that
Mm,
show over the holidays, she has just become obsessed with dancing and ballet, and she wants to wear the tutus. And I just see how impactful art
yeah.
is on the human spirit. It's so impactful, and so we really have to protect that.
I love hearing that. That's so funny that she tried to get on stage.
It was hilarious, and also like we could have we could have probably just told her, and we're still learning. It's just like with adult humans. If you're in relationship, like you have to set yourself up for success. Like here's
Yeah,
do, and here's what we can expect, and here's what we need in order for this to go well. We know to do this with each other, but Ben and I are still remembering, oh right, like we have to set her up for success by letting her know ahead of time. So yeah, it's always a learning adventure, isn't it?
it really is. I think I use those exact terms. Like I feel like whenever my wife tells me she's not feeling well, she's setting me up for success. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. Like I'm so grateful for that information because then I can, give you space or we can talk or whatever it is that you need.
Yeah, being able to, you talk about that a lot, and being able to just do a morning check-in, right? Being like,
Yeah,
I'm feeling today, just so you know, so we don't step on any toes. And I think that that's really valuable. I've picked that one up from you actually. I haven't been doing that, and lately I have. I've been checking in, just like, how you doing today?
mm,
And it really does help to remember that we're here to support our partners and not feed off of whatever mood they're in, but actually be in our own energy.
totally.
Um,
I love that. That's been like my major goal for this year is to live in my own energy. Is
yeah.
like whatever's happening around me, but I'm gonna try to stay in my peace.
That's a good year to do it. The world is definitely wilder than it has been in my lifetime, I think.
Yeah, yeah, the year of tariffs.
It's so bizarre. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation, but wow, wow, wow. It's a good thing that we have tools.
Yeah, exactly. It's never been a better time to meditate.
It's never been a better time to meditate, friends, and it's never been a better time to read How to Love Better. Thank you for sending me this book. Actually, I have two because I ordered one too. I always love to order the book.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. That's so nice. People, yeah, I think it's pre-orders are so important.
Yeah, they are. I order everyone who I know who's a writer. I always order their book, even if they send me one, because I want to support it. So, and then I have a copy to give away, so that always works out great. Um,
Nice.
so congratulations on this beauty. I'm sure you probably have like 5 more that you're already writing.
I'm
Are you
gonna write
already?
it. I'm gonna write another one this summer. But I'm gonna give myself a little bit of time to just relax.
Amazing. How long does it take you to write a book now?
Um, well, I mean, I keep writing because honestly, because of the meditating. The meditating just like makes the mind so much clearer. And like when I go away to like a 30 or 45-day retreat, um, it just makes it clear about like what I'm learning about myself and about reality and how these laws of the universe, how they affect different aspects of life.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, definitely gonna write two more at least.
Wow. Incredible. Well, I can't wait. And thank you so much for being willing to have this talk with me today. I'm really
Oh my
grateful.
gosh, no, thank you. This was so much fun.
Yeah, can't wait to share this with everybody. And until next time.
Yeah, thank you.